is not going to be able to join us today. So committee, a couple of things before we get started. We do have a lot of testimony today, and I want to make sure that everyone is heard, has an opportunity to speak on the bills before us. Due to the weather, we do have a lot on WebEx, so we will move as quickly and efficiently as we can. And we do need to be on the floor at 2:30. So we'll try to manage our time the best that we can, and I appreciate your indulgence with that. So I also want to caution conferees. Yesterday we had a lot of testimony that didn't pertain to the bills in front of us. So just please make sure that we keep to the bills that are in front of us. And with that, we will be hearing today Senate Bill 363 and Senate Bill 393, and since they are so very similar, we're going to be doing those together. So we will start with a brief from our reviser, Tamara Lawrence. Thank you, Tamara.
Thank you and good afternoon, committee. So these bills, as the Vice Chair said, are almost the same, but do have a couple of primary differences, so I will cover those differences as I get to them as we walk through the bill. You also should have access to a reviser memorandum that goes through both bills in one memorandum, and I would like to note that on page 4 of that memorandum is actually a comparison chart that looks at the section, so you can easily see the differences between the two bills. So now I'll get started. Yeah, absolutely. So both Senate Bill 363 and 393 would require school districts to annually publish on the district's website certain information from the preceding year by July 1st. And before I get into the details too much, I do want to note that there was an errant phrase from a pre-introduction version of Senate Bill 363 that was inadvertently left on page 1 of the bill in line 6. It says, except as provided in subsection D. That should have been stricken before the bill was even introduced. So I'd just like the committee to make note of that in case you choose to work the bill.
Just a moment. Yes, Senator Dietrich.
We're on the legislative website. I don't see the document.
Okay, so thank you for being patient. As you can imagine, Cindy's been overwhelmed with it. So we will get that to you here shortly. Thank you. But if it's okay, I'm going to have Tamara go ahead and proceed. Thank you.
So both bills would require school districts to annually publish by July 1st on the school district's website the following information: a list organized by grade level and area of instruction that includes learning materials and activities used for student instruction in the preceding school year, and the school district's or school's procedures for documentation, review, or approval of those learning materials or activities. And then here's where I'll note one of the differences. Senate Bill 363 also does require the school districts to publish online a list of teacher professional development materials. So there's kind of the first difference. 363 does have that additional requirement for teacher professional development materials, whereas 393 does not require publication of those materials. Both bills would require the list of learning materials and activities to be maintained on the website for at least 1 year. School districts would be authorized to update the materials throughout the year, but would not be required to do so, so long as all materials are published by the last day of the school year. Both bills define activities and learning materials the same in both. And then the second difference is in Senate Bill 393, there is a penalty provision for knowing violations of this section. Senate Bill 363 does not contain a penalty provision. You can see those penalties in 393 on page 2, beginning in line 9. Those penalties, as I said, would be for a knowing provision, and it would require the State Department of Education to withhold either a percentage or a specific dollar amount of the violating district's state foundation aid, whichever is less. And that percentage and amount would depend on the number of violations committed by the district, and then that withholding would end when the requirements of the section are met, and I will be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you very much. Questions? Senator Sykes, then Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Tamara. Does this conflict with any copyright laws or issues that licenses that there may be instruction in the classroom, but they can't. I'm just curious if that could cause any problems.
So both bills do actually contemplate that, and if you look at subsection C, I believe, of both of them, it does say that nothing in the section shall be construed to require the digital reproduction of the materials themselves, and does allow just a reference to the author and the name of the material.
Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've had questions from some constituents about the details that they would need to post. Like, is this every single lesson plan? And I don't know if you can address that. Thank you.
So what I can say is the bill doesn't actually ever use the term lesson plan, but it does define on page 2 activities and learning materials. So activities would include a presentation, assembly, lecture, or other event facilitated by a school or school district. It does not include student presentations. Learning materials includes textbooks, reading materials, videos, digital materials, websites, and other online applications, and any other material given to a student for student instruction.
Yes, and I want to piggyback real quickly on Senator O'Shea's question. Does anything in either Bill 363 or 393 require a teacher to post a year's worth of lesson plans for the upcoming school year? Because we've heard a lot that is what's included. So can you address whether that is included in either bill?
Yes. So both bills are for the preceding school year. So by the last day of the school year, all the materials for the school year that just ended will have to be posted. There is nothing for an upcoming school year. And as I said, there is nothing specifically referencing lesson plans, that term in the bill. Okay,
and Senator Dietrich, I know that Senator Petty was in line before you, and then we'll come to you. So, Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'm on. The word knowing in that you mentioned on 393, how is that defined?
So it's not actually defined in this bill, but I would take it to mean that the person who violates the section knew that they were doing so.
Is that legal? I mean, is that legal?
Yeah, I'll reach out and see if I can confirm that that is actually what that means in legal terms.
And the second part of that is that in that portion of the bill, excuse me, on page 2, concerning the penalties, I'm unclear as to who the notification of knowing violation comes from. Is there?
The bill does not speak to that. It just says that any school district does not comply with the requirements of this bill and knowingly violates it, would have those state foundation aid funds withheld by the State Department.
So the so-called, I mean, I'll just use the word whistleblower, that's an unknown element in here.
Correct. The bill does not speak to that.
Thank you.
Senator Dietrich, and then we will move on for the sake of time. So Senator Dietrich, and then if we have time, we'll circle back, committee.
Thank you. So there was a question that I received from our local library about the presentations that they make in a lot of elementary schools across Shawnee County. They come in and they do Kansas Connections type activities. They leave kids with materials and resources. It changes from year to year depending upon what the topic might be. Is that considered an activity that would need to be posted?
So if it is a learning material or activity that is used for student instruction at a school district and it meets the definition of an activity or a learning material, then yes, probably.
Okay, thank you.
And committee, hopefully during testimony, some of your questions will be addressed. If not, we'll try to circle back if we have time. So we will open the hearing for SB 363 and SB 393, and we'll start with proponent testimony. Senator Karen Tyson from District 12. Welcome to education, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the committee today. I always say that it's harder to be on this side of the podium than that side of the podium. I want to thank the committee for all they do in for schools in the state of Kansas to help make them the best possible school systems we have.
Senator Tyson, I am so sorry to interrupt. I should have announced this. Due to the number of conferees, we are going to limit testimony to 2 minutes. I'm so
2
sorry. We
minutes,
will.
That's fine.
We will start.
I'll go quick. Well, when the schools shut down with COVID-19, we all know what happened. We heard from parents and others that were extremely concerned of what was being taught in our schools. Mainly, we heard about critical race theory, but we did hear about other topics that were questionable in our education system. So this bill is a result of that, trying to be proactive to figure out we can never get ahead of the terminology, trying to legislate that. So what should we do? We should have the transparency and have the items available to the parents. So I know that I've done a lot of research and talked to many, many teachers. Some of this has already been done. I think the confusion is the definition of list. If you look in an IT system, a majority of websites that you're on, it's a list of items or links that you work to. So it's completely acceptable that the current systems that they're using that list those, I know there's at least 25 school districts that use a vendor that would satisfy that requirement. They're already doing it. This is just to make sure that the other schools aren't doing it. And since it's only 2 minutes, I'm going to fast forward, Madam Chairman. I would recommend a couple of changes to this also. I would recommend that in order to clarify the language, that we say list and web-based program or website, whatever the terminology would be, to make that clarification so that teachers wouldn't feel like that most teachers already do this, a majority of them. But we've got a few players out there that don't. And taxpayer dollars are paying for these schools, so I feel like the transparency is absolutely what we need. The other thing I would do, instead of just a look back, this legislation does require that they put it up after. I would ask that the committee would consider, and I've got a balloon amendment ready, consider changing July 1st, the first day of every semester, that they post it, and then as the material changes, they can update it and just have it updated by the end of the school year. That way, it would be forward-looking also, and we would be able to have the updates needed. With that, Madam Chairman, I hope that you'll consider the legislation 393 with amendments, and I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. And Senator, are you able to stick around for questions after proponents?
I will.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mike O'Neill from the Kansas Policy Institute. Welcome to the committee, Mike.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, and maybe I wasn't listening earlier. We're talking about both bills now, so it's
Correct.
On both bills. Because I wanted to let the individuals know I only submitted testimony on 363, which was the bill we asked to be introduced. And I don't mean by that any disrespect to 393, because as the revisor has told you, they're essentially the same in concept. We looked nationwide to see what was going on, and as you know, there's actually states that have tried to tackle this nebulous concept of CRT, whatever that is, and tried to define it and then ban it. We felt that the best approach, and the approach that I think most states are looking at, is let's not try to do that. Let's not try to perpetuate this perception in the Civil War about whether they're teaching this or that, but simply embrace transparency, and that's what we think most of the parents want. What I've done, and I will just commit this to you to read, we have some interesting poll results in terms of parental involvement, how teachers think about the issue of parental involvement and participation in curriculum. And then the final one that we have is a Rasmussen poll that basically breaks down just the politics of this in terms of Republicans essentially by polling favor parents over school boards, Democrats favoring school boards over parents, and this is, just a broad brush, and then independents, 2-to-1 in favor of parents over school boards. But this, I would suggest to you that this is not so much a political issue, is that parents of all stripes are demanding more. I'm going to give the Wall Street Journal article from yesterday to staff to send to the committee.
Okay,
With that, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Elizabeth Patton, State Director, Americans for Prosperity, Kansas. Welcome to the committee, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to testify again today. Just wanted to clarify a few things before the committee. My testimony is fairly similar to what we discussed yesterday, but I did want to clarify the goal of the policy that's being debated, and that when, from our perspective, when parents are deciding what is the best for their individual students, that information is a key component to that individualized education. And in our view, what the pandemic has highlighted is that the limitations and inconsistencies that exist today, more than ever, parents are wanting to seek those individualized students, because I actually heard a lot of conferees on both sides agree yesterday that, and I believe we'll hear the same thing today, that the goal is to put students and not systems at the center. And so if we're looking for more individualized, flexible approaches to learning, and one that does expose students to a wide variety of educational opportunities, because each child is different, and we want to make sure there is a menu of options, programs, services, courses, and schools that are addressed to design to address, unique needs and interests, parents and families need to know what's available and how to move forward. And so in our view, similar to what I have said before this committee, that with our goal with the education system and with the use of transparency and accountability and taxpayer dollars, the system should not be one of should be one that allows parents to discover and develop and apply the resources at their fingertips to help their kids realize their full potential and maximize their capacity in our state. So we think that this is a piece of the puzzle to reaching that goal. It's not the whole puzzle, but we do believe this is a piece of the puzzle to ensure that we recognize learning as it's occurring in our state and understand what that has looked like across the board in our state. I'll be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Next on WebEx, we have Libby Sobek, Director of Education Policy, Wisconsin Institute of Law and Liberty. Libby, are you there?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Libby Sobek. I am from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. We are a law and policy organization located in Wisconsin. We do a lot of work on education reform, and this year we worked with our state legislature to pass the nation's first curriculum transparency bill, which was unfortunately vetoed by our governor, as well as we are currently advocating for a Wisconsin Parent Bill of Rights. We support any legislation that empowers parents to be partners in their education, in the education of their child with their local school district. We have litigated and provided legal resources to Wisconsin parents around the state who've attempted to get more information from their school districts or from their administrators and have been unable to do so. Both Senate Bill 393 and 363 provide pivotal powers to allow parents to do just that. I also wanted to highlight the fact that these pieces of legislation also put into state law what is already in federal law. In federal law, there is a pupil rights amendment that is supposed to give every public school parent access to curricular information. What we've experienced here in the Badger State, and what I have to imagine is similar in the Sunflower State, is that despite this existing federal law, many school districts do not highlight this right, and most parents do not know about this right. We encourage you to consider the pieces of legislation to provide more transparency into our children's education. Thank you, and I'd be happy to stand for questions when appropriate.
Thank you so much, Libby. Next, we have Matt Beinberg, I apologize if I pronounced that wrong, Director of Education Policy from the Goldwater Institute on WebEx. Matt, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome to the committee, Matt.
Great, thank you very much. Madam Chair, members of the committee, for the record, Matt Beinberg, Director of Education Policy for the Goldwater Institute. I'm also speaking in support of the transparency provision specifically in SB 363. The legislation, as mentioned, would empower parents, provides them an opportunity to know what's being taught in the classroom. As I go into a little bit more of my written testimony, we've seen teachers nationally writing in places such as the Education Journal Education Week, saying that they feel they have a mandate to infuse politics into the classroom, with a number of stories and instances of that. Things like the New York Times 1619 Project, which obviously is an extraordinarily controversial content, academically discredited, and yet we're seeing investigators finding content like this being used in 3,500 classrooms in all 50 states. So that means Kansas as well. And as they've found, content like this is not typically going through formal curriculum adoption at the school district level. It's essentially being used on an individual basis as supplemental materials. So when parents are trying to find out whether or not a school is using this, there's no record of it showing up as an official curriculum document, but it is being presented to students, again, including in Kansas. The bill maximizes transparency for the parents while minimizing the workload for teachers. As the sponsor mentioned of the current bill, right now, teachers in Kansas, right, as a best practice, are commonly submitting their lesson plans. They're documenting those resources on their existing IT platforms. This bill essentially just provides that same sort of opportunity and says if that content's being documented within the school walls, there's no reason that current and prospective parents shouldn't also have access to see that material. In terms of the impact for teachers, this actually would have a positive impact, and teachers around the country, as similar bills are now moving in about 20 state legislatures, teachers around the country have actually noticed and commented that this would increase and improve their ability to spend their time on student instruction. As teachers have said, right now it's very difficult. Teachers, especially new teachers coming into the classroom, are expected to build their syllabus largely from the ground up. In fact, a national study found, a survey of teachers found that they report spending 4 hours every single week just searching for free materials to use. That's going on Google, going on YouTube. Having this material posted online would help empower especially those new teachers to see what high quality teachers are already using.
Matt, if you could wrap up, please. Your 2 minutes are up, so if you could just summarize, we'd appreciate it.
Sure. So again, just to make clear, this bill provides essentially transparency for parents while recognizing that this work is already being done by teachers. Happy to stand for questions.
Thank you so much. Next committee, we have Jenny Cox, a homeschool mom. Jenny on WebEx, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can. Welcome to the committee, Jenny.
Hi, my name is Jenny Cox and I support SB 363, Curriculum Transparency. I have homeschooled my children for many years, and each summer I would spend a large part of my time carefully looking at various curriculums to see how it would fit with my child and if I liked the content or layout. To this day, I love seeing and being able to critically think about my purchase. I know the same would be true with public school curriculum. Many parents would be able to see and critically assess the curriculum that their child will be learning from. They could ask questions such as, does this curriculum teach what I think my child should be learning? How does this curriculum get picked and approved? Moms like control. That's the way we are wired. We want to know the outcome is worth the investment. The outcome being our kids learn accurate academics using curriculum that serves the intended purpose, not an ulterior motive, and the investment being our tax dollars. This bill provides for the parent a sense of inclusion of all invested parties and a peace of mind. Since the parents are paying for the curriculum, they can know what they are buying. I don't pretend to know the logistics of being able to make curriculum accessible to parents, and I don't have all the answers, but if we teach our children to think outside the box and not to be confined to the current narrow thoughts, then I would make the assertion that we adults, through trial and error, can figure out a path forward to make curriculum accessible to parents in a way that is not cumbersome or burdensome to staff or the district employees. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny. And committee, that concludes our proponent testimony. I will draw your attention to written only from Sherry McCants, who is a private citizen. And with that, we will go to questions for proponents. Senator Sykes.
She emailed an agenda. Yeah, sorry. Didn't mean to answer the question. Thank you. I'm not sure who this question is for, but maybe I'm a little confused. Or is there any? Because I hear, we want information for parents. We want our students to strive. We don't want systems. We want our students for their full potential. But yet, this is only targeting our public schools. So how, as a parent, am I supposed to look at what is the curriculum in a private school versus a public school? And how do I I'm curious about, like, we're trying to make this more transparent, but we're only picking one factor in this. So how do we make transparency when only we're making one person or one group do this?
I see Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd be glad to answer that. This is taxpayer money. That's what funds the public schools. So that's why this big 393 is specifically at the public schools, because that's our taxpayer money. So that's why we're asking for transparency.
And I appreciate that, and I agree, yes. And I look at my curriculum for my schools, but in testimony, time after time again, we said, we want to be able to evaluate to make sure that this is what we want for our students as opposed to private school. We want to be able to evaluate all of these. We want transparency. And I don't see how this is doing that.
This absolutely is doing transparency. There's a lot of misinformation out there right now, and I actually think both bills are a teaching moment, because it is difficult to read through legislation and there's been so much interpretation that's not accurate. This is just asking for the material to be listed, which some schools already do. And that way, and like I said, we do need to make that a look forward instead of a look back, so that parents have the ability to see what's being taught in the classroom and have access. Because I was aware, I talked to a superintendent this weekend, it is federal law. He said any parent can come into his office and actually see the material, touch the material. So this just exposes to the parents what's available online, they can easily see, and then they can take the next step and go in and speak to the superintendent or somebody in the school district to actually see the material.
I appreciate that. And I think as parents, we have that. I mean, I look at all the information I get at back to school night, all the papers that I sign, and I get the curriculum, and I have that at my access. So are we trying to do this because parents are not doing their part of reading what comes from the schools and looking at their curriculum? They're not having those conversations with their kids about this?
There's many issues that need to be addressed in our K-through system. This is just addressing the transparency, the availability of the materials. I'll tell you, in fact, I hope teachers start to submit testimony. We haven't hardly gotten any on Senate Bill 520. We're having a hearing on it Monday. It would allow $250 reimbursement to the teacher for classroom material. So we are looking out for the teachers. This isn't against the teachers. This is a pro-parent transparency legislation.
And if I may,
Senator Sykes,
I'll let somebody else answer.
we can circle back if just for the sake of time, because I want the opponents to be able to have equal time, Senator.
We're talking about, like, many times about individual plans of learning. So I guess my question is, if my son needs an extra book, so is the teacher going to have to put 24 different books that she's supplementing for these kids? So I'll go ahead.
Thank you. And if I may, Senator Solentrop has a question, but Senator Tyson, I was hoping to catch you before you sat down. I do know that in SB 393, there is a section that deals with penalties. Are you open to removing the penalty section from that bill?
Thank you for asking, Madam Chairman. Yes, I am. We've noticed that in tax, if we don't put penalties, it doesn't get done. And so that's why that penalty was in here. But I actually have the Bloom amendment ready, if you would like.
Thank you very much. Senator Solentrop.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I'd like to ask the gentleman from the Goldwater Institute, does he know of any state that has passed and or in the process of passing legislation very, very similar to this?
Madam Chair, Senator, thank you for the question. Yes, as I mentioned, there are about 20 states now that have legislation. Libby, who also spoke from Wisconsin, actually passed both chambers of that legislature, passed it. It was vetoed by their governor. The Pennsylvania legislature also passed a provision requiring curriculum transparency. In Arizona, our legislature here, actually just at Senate Education Committee, passed legislation very similar to that. So it is advancing in multiple states, already going through one or multiple chambers, and as I mentioned, about 20 states now nationally moving to provide this sense of transparency, because I do think that as parents have spoken up to say this is something that's necessary, legislators are beginning to take note and act on their behalf.
Madam Chair, if I may ask that he supply that information to us to help support this attempt to pass this legislation.
Matt, is that something that you could provide for this committee?
Madam Chair, I'd be happy to provide information around that. I believe in my written testimony, there is actually a link that references some of that legislation already.
Thank you very much. And final question for proponent, Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is to Libby. I'm sorry, Libby, in taking down notes, I didn't get your last name, from Wisconsin. You mentioned about, and I applaud your governor for vetoing those bills, but you mentioned about federal law that supports all this, and so I would appreciate, I looked at your testimony, I don't see any reference to that, I don't see any footnotes, so if you could send that to our committee, that would be appreciated. Libby there?
Senator, I'd be happy to do so. I will direct you to pages 1 and 2 of my testimony. The last paragraph on page 1 and this 2 paragraphs on page 2 reference the federal pupil rights law, including the legal citations. I'd be happy to follow up to the committee and provide a direct link to that language as well.
Thank you very much, and thank you for those questions, committee. We are going to move on at this time to opponent testimony, and according to my agenda, they are all on WebEx. So hopefully we have them connected, and we will start with Kim Nelson, teacher. Kim, are you there?
I am there. Thank you for having me.
Welcome to the
for not
committee.
being there in person. We actually tried to make the drive. It was a little snowy outside. So again, my name is Kim Nelson, and I have been working with kids for the last 28 years. We're grateful for all that you do and all the decisions that you make on behalf of educators and on behalf of students in the state of Kansas. Parents and guardians have access to our classrooms like we have never had before. With all of the technology that is now in our classrooms, we have the ability to communicate on grading platforms such as PowerSchool or Skyward. We also have the ability to push out lesson plans on interactive websites such as Google Classroom or Blackboard or Nearpod. Currently, I have lesson plans that get pushed out on Monday. My parents can see everything that I am teaching for the entire week, Monday through Friday, with all of the links that I use. It even has me reading to the students that may be stuck at home for one reason or another. I know our math department does videos of themselves so that those parents that say they are confused by a particular topic, they can go back and watch that video with their student, and they have the ability to help them right there at home. So I think that this bill is unnecessarily punitive to teachers and their districts. The information is there. We do share it. Actually, when I was telling my students about this particular presentation that I was going to give to you today, one of my students said, "Why don't they just ask? It's on our Chromebooks." And I kind of have that same feeling. I also want you to know that I actually live where I vote, and I actually think it is important that our state elected body doesn't try to usurp the authority of our local elected officials. We have boards of education that are within our community making decisions for our community. They're making decisions for me as their teacher, they know well. They're making decisions for their neighbors, and then they're making decisions for the students that are actually living in our community. As a former Kansas Teacher of the Year team member, I had the ability to travel to Dodge City, to Winfield, and right here in Bonner Springs, Kansas.
Kim,
all of our districts are different.
Kim, I'm so sorry, your time has expired. If you could please just summarize, I'd appreciate it.
All right. The transparency these bills desire is already available. The negative impact of this bill, should it pass, could be devastating to school systems when it comes to time, money, and the potential hazards that it could provide.
Thank you so much for your testimony today. Next, we have Lauren Tice Miller, Director of Government Relations and Elections from KNEA. Lauren, welcome to committee.
Senator Erickson, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify virtually today, especially given the weather. I'm here to oppose both Senate Bill 363 and Senate Bill 393. To be clear, Kansas NEA has never opposed transparency, and we never will. We understand and embrace the involvement of parents in their students' learning. Our members dedicate countless hours to build meaningful relationships with parents and students, and many offer multiple channels of communication and invite parent involvement. There are also a number of mechanisms in place that allow parents to be engaged in their students' learning and opt their student out of lessons if they so choose. But these bills are not about transparency. They're about interference and discrediting our educators. They steal time away from our professional responsibilities and redirect it to data entry on websites that we have no doubt will be used to cherry pick information and used to villainize our teachers. And then Senate Bill 393 takes it a step further by establishing punitive measures if the materials are not cited properly. We believe both bills are ambiguous in the timeline the materials are expected to be published, and they operate under the assumption that all learning materials are simply reproductions of content created by someone else and can easily be linked online. Finally, not every parent has reliable access to the internet. Not every parent speaks or reads English. So in addition to spending time uploading information to a website that is not accessible to everyone, they will also continue to do what they are already doing to establish relationships with those parents, and they will likely be doing it outside of their contracted hours and not getting paid for it. Because of the ambiguity in both of these bills and the threat of penalty or litigation, we believe school boards will have no choice but to establish policies requiring teachers to publish materials ahead of the school year and not deviate from what they have published. This will have a chilling effect on education, as it would eliminate the spontaneous teachable moments that happen throughout the school day every single year.
Lauren, I'm
Yes,
sorry to
ma'am.
interrupt. Your time has expired. If you could please wrap up, I'd appreciate it.
That was my last word, so I will stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Okay,
Thank you, Senator.
thank you so much. Next, we have Mark Tallman, Associate Director, Kansas Association of School Boards. Welcome back to committee, Mark. Mark? Okay, we will come back and see if he joins us later. Kathy Brooks, citizen. Kathy, are you there? No? Okay. Rabbi Modi Reiber, Executive Director, Kansas Interfaith Action. Are you there, Rabbi?
I am here, Senator.
Okay. All right. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Erickson, members of the committee, I'm Rabbi Moti Reiber, Executive Director of Kansas Interfaith Action, a statewide multi-faith issue advocacy organization, here to oppose 393 mostly, but I oppose both bills. We've been concerned over the last several months about how the conversation about critical race theory or critical pedagogy has been taking place, both here and in other states. Our concern is what happens here will happen in other states, that anything with racial or in the case of Kansas, LGBT content will be flagged as toxic and removed from curriculum and libraries, and the teachers and administrators will be targeted by parents or others who will look at every slightly controversial lesson plan as evidence of a great CRT conspiracy. We believe the reframing of this issue as transparency is a rhetorical trick, a pivot over something that is seen as being unopposable. How can you be against transparency? As I testified yesterday, as a longtime parent in the Shawnee Mission School District, I always knew what my kids were doing, were learning, and I had access to their material. So the problems with this bill are, it's a massive unfunded mandate on our school districts. It's going to cost, I think the governor's office said it's going to cost millions of dollars. We're just interested to see some studies on that. In addition, it's a massive amount of busy work on top of all the work we ask our teachers to do. But worse, this bill puts all of our teachers in schools in a state of permanent probation, the assumption that they're doing something wrong and need to be monitored. But what ends up happening is that this material is waiting for an aggrieved community member or a think tank official or a Fox News intern to find a smoking gun in the big pile of paper and turn one of our teachers or one of our school districts into this week's target of the pile-on. It's my opinion that this entire conversation about critical pedagogy and transparency is an all-out attack on public education and using racially charged language to undermine support for public schools. The public school system remains one of Kansas's jewels, and it deserves better than what this legislation tries to do with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony. Did Mark Tallman join us? Okay, what about Kathy Brooks? Okay, well, I'm sorry, we're going to miss their testimony. Committee, I will draw your attention, and if it's okay, I will not read all 41 names for the opponent written-only testimony, but I will draw your attention to that. I believe that there's more testimony that needs to be uploaded, and appreciate Cindy working so hard, but that will be posted. There will be additional testimony. So with that, we will open it up for questions for the opponents. Any questions? Okay, well, we have a little extra time, and so I will open it back up to any questions for proponents or opponents since we have a little bit of extra time. Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question should be quick. Can you remind me, and this might be, I'm not sure it's for, but who introduced Senate Bill 363?
Mr. O'Neill, would you care to address that?
Yeah, that's the one that Kansas Policy Institute asked to be introduced.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, second question, I'm not sure who it'd be for, but do we have an example of anyone who has asked for a teacher to share the information and has not been able to receive it? Thank you.
I see Senator Tyson approaching. Senator Tyson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. There's an example of a list that a teacher provided. She read the bill and she went out within 3 minutes and put together a list. So she was just demonstrating how simple this was. I have not had a teacher yet, once you explain to them what they're looking for. I mean, this isn't even a syllabus. We get syllabuses from college. It's not even that level of detail. So most of them realize after they see that it's not a problem. Thank you.
Any other question? Senator Petty.
I guess I'm not addressing this as a question, I'm just going to make a comment. I've read the bill, and I've taught school, and I've written lesson plans, and I see, and I have heard from many, many educators about the fact that this does include all materials that would be used within your classroom for everything. So it's not, saying it's simple doesn't mean, I find very offensive because it's a lot of work and teachers do lesson plans every day. And as we've heard here repeatedly, maybe I'll just ask a question of one of our conferees. It would be Kim, if Kim's still on.
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Kim, I don't recall for sure what, I know you're in Bonner. Are you library?
I'm sorry, would you say that one more time?
What's your teaching position in the Bonner School District?
I teach 6th grade English language arts.
And Kim, could you again share with us how you make your materials that you use within your classroom available to not only to your administrator, but to your families that you have their children?
Absolutely. We use a format called Google Classroom. I know some of my peers use a few different things to push out their information or disseminate that information. But on Google Classroom, I have links, and this all really, a lot of this transparency has come from our lockdown. It's come from being at home and having our at-home learners and needing the links in order to be able to do what we want to do and try to maintain some sort of normalcy. We attach every link that we have. We've attached links of us reading material to students that might struggle reading it on their own. We have attached all of the video links. Matter of fact, while I was waiting to join this meeting, I was having to download some of those videos onto our special website in order to be able to actually post them so students could open them. So everything that I submit and everything that some of my fellow teachers submit is all laid out typically for the week. So beginning on Monday, parents can see when there's going to be a test and there's a test link, or they can see a video that we're going to watch, or they can look at the book that we're going to read. And as I said before, our math teachers actually audio tape themselves, showing demonstrations for parents and students to watch at home should they need to.
Just a follow-up. Do you see?
Quickly.
Okay. So, so you're providing the materials, you're already listing it, as you said, with doing virtual learning, that's even increased the amount of information that's going home to parent. Well, I guess I should say it caused teachers to figure out ways to increase that amount of information that's going out. So the comment was made that this would be nothing more, there would be no additional work involved with this legislation because you're already doing that.
It's going to be time consuming, and I'm not exactly sure where that's going to come from. So if I can take my lesson plan folder, for example, and just stick it on the website and say, you know, hey, we're doing a long walk to water, and if you would like to look at those lesson plans, here's the folder, take a look. You know, that would be different. But if we're talking about creating a completely separate list and categorizing those lists, and then as the lists change, making sure we update the lists, it's an additional step, and it's something that's going to cost teachers additional time. And we will have to have someone at the schools that is managing that, making sure that everybody's doing what they need to do, which would increase outside of a classroom, even more activity, just in checking those resources and making sure that everything is the way it should be.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. Two last quick questions. Senator Straub, then Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a parent of school-age children and someone who has both privately homeschooled and public virtually schooled my children, I can actually speak, I think, very well to this. My oldest was privately homeschooled upon entering her junior year of high school, and the school actually required me as a parent to submit the curriculum and test scores and everything that I had used for my student in order to get credit to graduate from this public high school. I actually opted out of giving them all of her records. I didn't feel that it was necessary, but on the same token, I do want to know as a parent what's being taught to my kids. So if there's anyone from any school districts here that can tell me that they don't require transfer students coming in to submit the curriculum and those kind of things, I would be really interested to know if any of our school districts don't have requirements for curriculum transparency. I fully support both of these bills. I think it's both good for the educator and for the parent and for the student. And this is one positive thing that has come out of COVID, that now our curriculum is actually transparent.
Thank you, Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want clarification because I don't think Senator O'Shea's question was answered. I think she asked, do we have examples of parents who have requested for their students in public schools for curriculum or information, and that has been denied?
Do any conferees want to address that? Yes, Mr. O'Neill.
Yes, but for reasons of confidentiality, I mean, anecdotally, we've gotten a lot of that information, which kind of informed us that this is something that needed to happen. I will see if I can't get you a better response to that, but protecting confidentiality, which I think is important.
So I want concrete examples, not anecdotal, because I will say I have had these conversations. I have talked to people. It has always been 100% transparent. And I think we are looking for a problem here. And I just looked at my own portal for my kid's school, and I have everything for the last year that he has done. Test, the notes, the videos, all of that is available. And so I'm curious about why we're not having this conversation with our children and then having it with parents. But if you have concrete evidence, I would love to see that.
What we have more concrete evidence of is the suspicion of what is going on, whether it's reality or not. And I think that's really what we're trying to protect against, whether we get any credit for it or not. There are states that are trying to define what this is and then ban it. That's not what we're here to do. We're here to try to recognize what you are telling us is already there, and trying to tamp down this lack of trust that goes both ways, and try to get us to a point where there is a comfort level that nobody's hiding anything from anybody. You know, whether it's true or not, the perception is certainly out there.
And I tell you the perception is there, and I look at your sheet, which has information that is not exactly accurate, because you're saying we're dealing with apples to apples here. And then part of these statistics that you have are just Kansas voters. They do not have students in public schools. But then when you look, I asked for this information from you and I did not receive it, but I did go and find it by searching on the internet. And I looked at, just looking at parents and grandparents of teachers, and their perception of what is going on in those schools is very different from what you are putting out here. So yes, I would agree that we have different perspectives. But if it's people who are actually engaged in the process and parents of those teachers or parents of students that are having those conversations, they're not having the problem. It's what we're seeing on cable TV that is saying that we have a problem, and then it's putting the distrust. But thank you.
And yeah, you basically made my point for me. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
And we do have Matt Beinberg. Matt, you had your hand raised. Did you want to address? And then we will need to wrap up committee.
Sure, Madam Chair, just to provide a couple of concrete examples, we've actually had parents in multiple states across the country. We're actually now representing a mother in Rhode Island who asked her local school district for information about their curriculum so she could see it before her incoming daughter would enroll. They told her that she couldn't simply talk to the teacher, she couldn't just talk to the principal, she had to submit formal public records requests. When she did so—
I appreciate that. I want Kansas examples. So send me Kansas examples. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Committee, I would venture to say that this conversation could go on indefinitely. I would encourage you to reach out to any of the proponents or opponents with further questions or comments. I will draw your attention that our next meeting is tomorrow. We will be discussing SB 341 and also be looking at inserting SB 31 into SB 341. And note a time change, we will be meeting at noon tomorrow instead of 1:30. So with that, thank you to everyone for your participation today. We are adjourned.